15th April 1912. No one can forget this date, as on this day the most painful and heart-wrenching incident of history took place. Titanic was the biggest and strongest ship of its time. It was believed that this ship can never sink, but something else was written in the fate of Titanic. This ship could not even complete its first journey and became a victim of a terrible accident. Small ice rock in the sea put a complete stop to the journey of Titanic. In that dark night, such a dance of death took place on Titanic for 3 hours in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean that its screams are still being heard in the Atlantic Ocean. Even today, the soul shivers remembering that painful incident of Titanic. When the Titanic ship was sinking in the sea, at that time the water was filling in Titanic at such a fast speed that in its last moments, Titanic stood straight in the sea. But Titanic was such a heavy ship that despite being strong, it broke from the middle and broke into 2 parts and sank in the lap of the sea. When Titanic was sinking in the sea, there were more than 2,200 people on board, including children and youngsters. More than 1,500 people died by drowning in the sea with Titanic. At the time when Titanic sank, the temperature of the sea water was -2 degrees Celsius. For about 30 minutes after Titanic sank, the sea was echoing with the screams of people. But after 30 minutes, the sea gradually became silent. The cold water of the sea started to tighten the grip of death on people, and in no time, the Atlantic Ocean turned into a graveyard. Friends, this accident that happened with Titanic could have been prevented, and the lives of all the people could have been saved. These 6 mistakes were not made at that time. If these 6 mistakes were not made, today Titanic would have been in the news not because of the accident, but because of its success. 10th of April 1912. This was the day when the world's largest and luxurious ship, Titanic, standing all set to depart on its first journey. And there was a huge crowd of lakhs of people at the port to see the start of Titanic's first journey. Neither the passengers sitting on Titanic, nor the lakhs of people who were saying goodbye to Titanic knew that such a big mistake had been made in the construction of the ship they were saying goodbye to, which would sink this big ship in its very first journey. First mistake. When Titanic left for its first journey, after 2 days, i.e. on the 12th April 1912, Titanic started getting the first ice warning. Often, when a ship passing through the sea sees an iceberg, it warns the nearby ships through radio signals so that the ships which are going to pass through the iceberg route become alert, and finding icebergs in the sea is a common thing. Titanic changed its route twice, keeping these warnings in mind. After 2 days, i.e. on the 14th April, Titanic gets 7 more ice warnings, but the crew of Titanic ignores these warnings. Titanic's radio operator told about these warnings. Captain of Titanic was also informed, Fevestre. But the captain did not take these warnings seriously and did not slow down the speed of Titanic. If the captain of Titanic had paid attention to these warnings and driven Titanic at a slow speed or changed its path a little, then perhaps this big accident could have been avoided. The second mistake is that there is a cruise next at this place on the ship, in which 1 or 2 people are seated so that they can keep an eye on the icebergs coming in front of the ship. When the person sitting in this cruise next on Titanic saw the iceberg, he immediately called and informed that there's an iceberg in front. Then the first officer, William, sent a message to the engine room to run the engine of the ship in reverse. If you look at the rear part of Titanic Eastern, then there are 3 poplars fitted in it, out of which 1 poplar is fitted in the middle. In front of the middle poplar, this is called a rudder. This rudder works to turn the ship left or right, but this rudder works even better when the middle poplar keeps rotating. When the first officer sent a message to the engine room to run the engine of the ship in reverse. So what happened was that first, the poplars of the ship stopped, which were pushing the ship forward, and then within a few seconds, the side poplars started rotating in reverse, but because of the rudder, the middle poplar remained closed. Experts believe that if the ship's engine was not started in reverse, then these rudders would have done their work efficiently, due to which Titanic could have been turned before it hit the iceberg. The third mistake is that it would not be wrong to say that Titanic sank due to its high speed. When Titanic was running on the sea, then its speed was 40 kilometers per hour, which was too much for a huge and heavy ship like Titanic. In fact, the captain of the ship had received the order from the owner of Titanic that Titanic should be run at full speed so that Titanic becomes known for its grandeur as well as its speed. Because of this, the crew of Titanic was pushing the ship forward at full speed. Due to this high speed, there was a lot of pressure on the infrastructure of Titanic. The ship was not designed in such a way that it could bear such high pressure. The result was that as soon as the information about the iceberg was received, the speed of the ship could not be reduced, and Titanic collided with the iceberg. This caused a double blow to the structure of Titanic. First, the infrastructure of Titanic was already bearing the pressure of water due to high speed. And secondly, the impact of the iceberg made a hole in the Titanic. If the speed of Titanic had been less, then perhaps the crew of Titanic would have got some time to react, and perhaps Titanic could have been saved. Fourth mistake. Titanic was running at full speed, and the crew of Titanic did not even pay attention to the ice warnings received from other ships. Look, Titanic kept moving towards the iceberg, but despite this, Titanic could still have been saved from the accident, because there were two brave men sitting on the ship's deck who were keeping an eye on every iceberg coming ahead in the sea. But they did not have one thing to see the icebergs from a distance. That was a telescope. In fact, it was a surprising thing that such a big, luxurious ship on which every kind of luxury was present, but one small thing like a telescope was not present on the ship. The guards sitting on the deck did this much about the iceberg. But it was too late by then. Titanic had reached very close to the iceberg. Perhaps if there was a telescope on Titanic at that time, then the iceberg could have been seen in time and the accident could have been averted. Fifth mistake. When the wreckage of Titanic was found and research was done on it, it was found that when Titanic was being built, the company that built it had made a big mistake, that too intentionally. It is true that icebergs keep floating at various places in the Atlantic Ocean. All these small obstacles were avoided by the ship. These heavy ships can easily bear this, and that day, the captain of the ship, Smith, tried his best to deal with the iceberg. To reduce the speed of Titanic, the engine was switched off and started in reverse, and he also tried to change the direction of Titanic. Despite all these efforts, the ship collided with the iceberg. However, this ship could still have survived if this mistake had not been made while building Titanic. When research was done on the wreck of Titanic, it was found that while building it, cast iron rivets were used to join the large steel plates together and not steel. The company that built Titanic did this intentionally because by using cast iron, the company wanted to cut costs here so that they could make a profit. Now, since cast iron is softer than steel, when Titanic collided with the iceberg, the rivets opened at the place where the impact occurred, due to which the large steel plates got uprooted due to the pressure of water, and water started filling in Titanic rapidly. If steel rivets were used instead of cast iron while building Titanic, then perhaps that iceberg would not have caused such damage to Titanic, and Titanic would have been saved from sinking. Sixth mistake. Perhaps it would not be wrong to say that a chain of mistakes had been made on Titanic, and after so many mistakes, Titanic had to be sunk. Titanic was divided into solid water-type compartments. Even if 4 out of 16 compartments were filled with water, this ship would not have sunk. But it was the bad luck of this ship that 6 out of its 16 compartments were filled with water, which clearly meant that now this ship could not be saved from sinking. The ship was slowly sinking in the sea, and water started rising above the ship. It took 2 hours and 40 minutes for this ship to sink. This was enough time to save every passenger on the ship. But there were not enough lifeboats on the ship. There were only 5 lifeboats on the ship, in which only 1,200 people could be seated. But at that time, there were more than 2,200 people on the ship. When Titanic was sinking, there were many people around. There was an atmosphere of chaos. Everyone wanted to make their place in the lifeboat, but the situation was so chaotic that only half of the lifeboat was being filled, and they were being put into the water. When the last lifeboat was put off from the ship at 2:05 in the night, at that time there were still more than 1,500 people on the ship. Only those people who were very rich were made to sit in the lifeboat. The ship was sinking very fast in the sea. At 2:18, a short circuit occurs due to which darkness engulfs Titanic and the ship breaks into two parts and is handed over to the sea. It is believed that the number of people who died was much more than 1,500, because many people had boarded the ship without tickets, of which there is no record. This last mistake was overconfidence, because before this Captain Smith was the captain of Titanic's sister ship Olympic, and one day Olympic also got damaged after colliding with a similar rock. But Olympic just survived the accident. Titanic was also built like Olympic, and it was also promoted in the same way that this ship can never sink. Due to this overconfidence, attention was not given to keeping enough lifeboats on the ship, the brunt of which was borne by more than 1,500 people by losing their lives. Friends, the Titanic accident was really a shocking one. Please keep subscribe our channel for more interesting videos. Thanks.